So now we move into a new chapter dealing with property ownership, and kind of changing gears a little bit. Talking about something a little bit different, but how can you own property? There are different. Obviously, there are different ways you can own it. That's what we're going to be dealing with in this particular chapter. But also, what is real estate? It might not be exactly what you're thinking by the time we get finished with this chapter, because that's sort of what we're going to be dealing with for the most part throughout this entire chapter. What is real estate? We want to make sure we can define it. And then how do we convey it? How do you transfer real estate from one party to another party? Some of the other topics we're going to talk about are the land characteristics, their physical descriptions, land descriptions, things of that nature, encumbrances. I see a list there. I won't read all of them, but quite a few things we're going to be talking about in this chapter. So I think you'll enjoy this for sure. Well, as we like to start out each new chapter is just going over some new terms or definitions. Hopefully you've heard of at least some, if not most of them. But if any of these terms, again, you're not familiar with, it's a good idea to know terms. Okay, you need to know what these things are. But we start out with the definition of land. So what is land? Well, it says that would be obviously the surface of the earth, right? But it also includes the subsurface, all the way down to the center of the earth. That's a long ways down. But then it also says it includes the airspace above the surface. And we'll talk about how much airspace you actually get. So when you think about this, so if you own land, you don't just own the top, the dirt, the part you're walking on. You actually own all the way down to the center of the earth. That's a long ways down. And you're going to see as we go through why that's such a big deal. But it also includes the airspace above the land, right? You own all of that. So when we talk about land, you want to keep this in mind. Airspace above, the subsurface below, along with the part you're walking on. Now, you also see where it says land is not considered scarce. Now, that might be a little contrary to what a lot of people actually believe. And I will tell you, there are some areas, like if you're looking for a lot to build on in a particular subdivision or neighborhood, it's possible it could be scarce in that situation. There's just no more land to be bought. Somebody owns it all. But what they're talking about here is, land in its totality, worldwide, or even United States wide. Believe it or not, there's lot more land that's unoccupied than occupied. So that's why they say land is not scarce. It is not. I might remember that if I was you. All right. So what is real estate? And or sometimes you hear it referred to as realty. Real estate, it says that's the real property. Is land. I'll get it out in a minute. Real estate or real property is land and all things attached to it. Now, what I want you to understand right now, there's two types of property that you can own. It's either going to be real property or it's personal property. That's it. It's got to be one or the other. And in real estate, it is absolutely essential that you can differentiate between the two. You got to know what's real and what's personal. So again, what is real property? It's land and everything attached to it, right? We know excuse me. We know land is the surface, the subsurface, all the way down to the center of the earth, the air above it, but also any buildings or structures or improvements that have been made to the land, you own that as well. That's all considered part of real estate. That's real property. Okay? Now, y'all, that you notice here, there are some physical characteristics of land. There are 3 physical characteristics. Be good to know that. I would make sure you know the 3 physical characteristics. Y'all, land is immovable, it's indestructible, and it's heterogeneous. Well, that might be a term you're not familiar with, but y'all, if you're not, y'all, heterogeneous, y'all, just means there's no 2 parcels that are identical. There's no 2 parcels of land that are identical or exactly the same. That's the physical characteristics. Now, do we believe that? Y'all, is land considered immovable? Y'all, can you move land? Well, it says here you can't, so I suggest you cannot move land. Y'all, what I want you to be careful with here, and a lot of people, again, are not thinking about this the right way. You're thinking about the dirt, topsoil, if you will. I can get a front end loader and come in and dig out large chunks of land and haul it off. Okay, well, that's not land. What is land? Land obviously includes that part, the surface, but it also includes all the way down to the center of the earth, the airspace above your land. You're not going to move all of that. So can you move dirt? Absolutely, you can move dirt, but dirt's not the same as land. You got to make sure you get that through your head. Make sure you understand what land is. It's indestructible. If you destroy land, again, can you destroy topsoil, have an oil leak or something like that? Sure. But that's not the same as destroying the land, again, when you look at the definition of land. So it cannot be destroyed. And again, there are no 2 parcels of land that are the same or identical. For no other reason, they're in 2 different locations. That makes them different, right? So that's what heterogeneous means. All right. Here is saying that real property can be converted to personal property. Now, we haven't talked about personal property yet, but we're getting ready to. But basically, and I'll just go ahead and say it, personal property is anything you can own that's not attached to the land. Obviously, if it's attached to the land, that's real property. If it's not attached, that's personal property. If you own a car, that's not attached to the land. That's personal property, right? But here saying real property can become personal property by severance. For example, if you have a house, is that house considered real property or personal property? Obviously it's real property. It's attached to the land, right? But could I sever it from the land? Unattach it. You see that from time to time where people will actually move a house from one location to another and move it to a completely different location. Well, obviously you can do that, but you got to unattach it from the land. You got to sever it from the land. And once it's been severed from the land, at that point, then it's considered personal property, right? Now, when they get it to where it's going and reattach it to the land in a new location, now it's considered real again, okay? So, it's just to let you know that real property, it can become personal property if it's severed from the land. In other words, it's unattached. Okay. Now let's talk more about this personal property, which we just said personal property is anything you can own that's not attached to the land. That's considered personal. Now you also see a term here in parentheses. And when I'm teaching the live classes, I ask this quite a bit, but what does that word say? And it seems like almost everybody says personality. And then they'll say, and Frankie, you misspelled personality. Well, I will tell you, If I was trying to spell personality, I would agree with you that's misspelled. Y'all, that is not personality. Y'all, the term is personality. It's not personality, it's personality. And it is spelled correctly. Now, y'all, I'm pointing this out because I know on the exam, y'all, they may very well just use that term, personality, in place of the term personal property. Y'all, it's the same thing. It's just two different terms that mean the exact same thing. Y'all, personality just means personal property. So if you see that term used in a question, y'all, you know they're referring to personal property. All right? And then also in that same paragraph, y'all, it lists some other terms that also mean personal property. Okay? I'm not going to go through all of those. You see them there. You can look at them yourself. But again, they just all mean personal property. But y'all, there's two of them I do want to just mention to you. We need to talk about a little bit. And one of those is called emblements. Y'all, emblements obviously, again, means it's personal property. But emblements is a particular type of personal property. And it says here that would be annual crops. Y'all, annual crops are considered personal property. So why does that matter? Well, y'all, let's say that you're working with a buyer and they're looking at buying a property sitting on, let's say, has 5 acres of land, obviously with a house on it. And maybe the seller currently has something planted on 4 acres. Maybe they got corn planted out here on 4 of the 5 acres. Well, now the buyer closes. They now own the property. Who owns the corn now that the buyer has now bought the property? And y'all, the answer is the seller. Y'all, the seller still owns that corn. Well, wait a minute. What the buyer just bought that property, it should be theirs. Y'all, when you have a contract of sale, obviously to buy a house, y'all, contract law says you can only convey real property via contract of sale. Okay? So if it's not real property, it's not going to be included with the purchase. That corn is considered an emblement. Y'all, that's an annual crop, right? So annual crops are personal property. Therefore, it does not convey to the new owner. Well, so how does that work? Well, y'all, at the end of the day, y'all, the buyer, the new owner, the buyer would have to allow the seller to come back on the property whenever it was time for that corn to be harvested and y'all, to get the corn, y'all, to harvest the corn. Because the corn still belongs to the seller because it's personal property. I'm telling you, if you don't get this, you're going to have a lot of problems with not only, obviously, you're going to have a lot of problems with your clients. Because my guess is most buyers are thinking they just bought 4 acres of corn, right? And they didn't because it's an annual crop. Well, some questions I tend to get in my live classes, well, then who owns the corn when it comes up next year? Okay, well, corn's not coming up next year, right? Again, what are emblements? Annual crops. They're only going to come up one time. Now, you can go and plant more, and that's different. But, if you don't go plant more corn, it's not going to come up next year. So that's why it's called an annual crop. Now, obviously, who would be planting it next year if it's planted? The new owner, the buyer. Then buyer, now it's yours. But things that are not, for example, say an apple tree. That's not an annual crop. That, I think, what do they call that? Perennial? Those produce year after year after year after year. But you don't replant an apple tree every year. So an apple tree would be included. That's considered real property. But again, implements or annual crops are considered personal property. I'm telling you, if you don't make sure your clients understand stuff like this, you're going to have sellers thinking they're going to be keeping whatever, and buyers are thinking it's part of the purchase price, and it's not, or may not be. So y'all, this is why it's so important to be able to differentiate between what's real property and what's personal property. Y'all, there's going to be a lot more that we're going to be talking about, but y'all, this is just one example. Y'all, and by the way, another, we'll get into that in a minute. Let's just move on to this next slide here. We're still talking about personal property. But y'all, some types of personal property is considered tangible. Tangible meaning I can feel it. Y'all, it's physical. I can hold it, feel it, touch it. But then there's also things that are considered intangible. Y'all, it's just not something physical that you can hold or touch or feel. And you can see some of the difference there. Y'all, tangible means like a car, stuff like that, bicycle. Intangible would be like stock, copyrights. Those are not physical things, but it's still things you own, and it's considered personal property. So just so you know, there is a difference between tangible personal property and there's also intangible. Okay? All right. The next term we need to make sure we understand is improvements. I don't think this should be too big a deal. Y'all, obviously, an improvement means you've improved something. Y'all, obviously, like the land. So, y'all, anything that you would add to the land that would increase its value, for example, would be considered an improvement. If I take this vacant lot and build a house on top of it, does that increase its value? Hopefully so. So the house would be considered an improvement. If I paved a driveway, that would be an improvement. If I add landscaping, that's another improvement. Maybe I dig a well on the property. That's an improvement. So an improvement basically is anything that would create or add value to the land. Next term you see is something called an appurtenance. I find that this is a term that a lot of people are not very familiar with, not very difficult. It's just a new word. Just because learning a new word certainly doesn't mean something hard. But what's an appurtenance? An appurtenance is a right that's permanently attached to the land. Now, there could be many different examples of this, and we will be talking about quite a few of them. But one significant example that we will be talking a lot about as we go further into it would be like an easement. In fact, a lot of times you might hear it called an easement appurtenant. Well, what does that mean? What is an easement? If you don't know what an easement is, again, we've got a section that we'll be dealing with to make sure you understand that. But for right now, an easement basically is just the right that one person has to cross over someone else's property for some reason. That's a legal right they have, to be able to cross over somebody else's property for some reason. In a nutshell, okay, that's what an easement is. Well, if it's an easement appurtenant, remember it says here an appurtenance is a right, such as the easement, but it's a right that's permanently attached to the land, right? So, let's say I have an easement appurtenant across my property that my neighbor has the rights to use. Well, if I sell my property, obviously a new homeowner comes in, now owns it. Can the new homeowner decide I don't want the neighbor to be crossing over my property and I'm going to terminate the easement? Can they do that? No. Why? Because, again, an appurtenance is a right, and it's a permanent right that's attached to the land. It has nothing to do with who owns the property. But whoever owns the property must comply with that, in this case, the easement, right? That is a permanent right that's attached to the land. It does not follow whoever the owner is. It stays attached to that land. So y'all, that's something, and y'all, again, we're going to talk a lot more about this in another module, but these easements. But y'all, obviously that would be a big deal. Y'all, if I'm looking at buying a house or buying property, y'all, I'd want to know if there's any easements across this property, meaning that other people will have the rights to come on or cross over my property. And if that easement's there, then there's nothing you can do about it when you buy it, right? So I would certainly want to look into that. I'd want to know about it, and I would really have a really difficult, irritating time with my agent if I bought a property that had an easement running through it or across it, and my agent never told me about that, right? Because that may affect whether or not I want the property. So anyway, but y'all, that's what an appurtenance is. What's an appurtenant? A permanent right that's attached to the land. That's it. All right. Next term is a fixture. Now, I will tell you, this is a big deal in real estate. Believe it or not, this can cost you a lot of real estate transactions if you're not paying attention here. Y'all, so what is a fixture? Y'all, a fixture is personal property that's been attached to real property. Okay? Y'all, there's tons of examples of that. But y'all, in essence, y'all, in fact, here, I'll give you this as an example. Oftentimes you'll see where a homeowner looking to sell their house will have like a formal living room, or let me back up. Not a living room, a dining room. They'll have a formal dining room. Really nice, formal, really nice chandelier over the table. One of the things I've just learned from experience, I have to ask every homeowner, seller, do you plan on leaving that chandelier over the table? Are you going to leave that here, or are you planning on taking that with you? Well, it is very common the seller say, oh, Frankie, that chandelier's been in my family for 10,000 years. There's no way I'm leaving that here. Okay, well then you need to take it down now before we put the house on the market and then put something back up in its place. Y'all, that chandelier is considered a fixture. Y'all, you've attached, in fact, you hear a lot of times it referred to as a light fixture. It's personal property when you purchase it because it's not attached to anything. A lot of times, usually it comes in a box or whatever. But then once you take it out the box and you attach it to the house, now it becomes a fixture, and a fixture is now considered real property. Seller is staying. In fact, y'all, the way that this would work, y'all, if you don't unattach it and you leave it there, y'all, it once a buyer comes in the house and they see the fixture, if they see it and then make an offer, and obviously you accept it, y'all, it's too late. You cannot take it down at that point. Y'all, the buyer has every right to think that that is part of the sale. That fixture is real property, and it includes, and is included with the purchase. Okay? Y'all, bookshelves. Y'all, if you've got it screwed into the wall or bolted so it doesn't fall over, then you've attached it to the house. That's a fixture. So, y'all, fixtures are any personal property that you've attached to the house, then that will be included with the sale. Seller, you have to leave it at that point. Now, again, if the seller does not want to leave it, whatever it is, y'all, they've got to unattach it. Y'all, take it down, take it away, take it out, and then if you need to, replace it, or if you're not going to like a bookshelf. If you pull that out, now you probably got holes in the wall. You need to repair that. You got to fix that. But you got to do that before you put the property on the market. It's got to be done before. So just make sure you understand what a fixture is, because I'm telling you, this is probably the one biggie that causes a lot of people problems. In fact, I know some of you are thinking this right now, so let's go ahead and address this, because I get it in the live classrooms a lot. Well, what about that flat screen TV I got on the wall? Is that flat? Do I have to leave my TV or can I take it with me? There's not a one answer for that question, because I will tell y'all, probably most of these flat screen, the TVs, are not fixtures, and the reason they're not considered fixtures is because they're just hanging on the bracket, right? The argument could be made that I could just walk up to the TV and just lift it up off the bracket. It's not attached to anything, it's just hanging there. It's not attached to anything. Now the bracket's attached. There's no argument there. The bracket is attached, but the TV is not. It's just hanging on the bracket. All I got to do is unplug it, pick it up, and walk away. In that case, you could argue that then the TV is considered personal property, would not have to stay. But I will tell you, some of these TVs, they are attached to the bracket. They're actually screwed to the bracket. They're not just hanging there, they're screwed to it. Then that's a fixture, right? Without getting into the weeds too much on these flat screen TVs, which can be a huge problem, here's the rule of thumb. If the seller is planning on taking the TV with them, then first of all, I would make that clear in your advertising. The TV hanging on the wall in the family room is not staying. That will not be part of the sale. It will be coming down. Now that's assuming it's personal property. But see, the other part of that, again, you can't just take the TV and leave the bracket there. You're either going to have to take all of it or none of it. So when you take the bracket down, now you got holes in the wall. You got to repair that. Okay, you're going to have to repair the holes in the wall. You got to paint over it, and chances are you're going to find, because you're not going to be able to get the paint to match perfectly, so you may wind up painting that whole room to make it look right. At the end of the day, it might be just as cheap, if not cheaper. Just leave the TV there and buy another one for wherever you're moving to. But just be careful. At the end of the day, as long as you have it in the contract, in the agreement, maybe we put in there, the TV is not staying. And might even put in there, the TV is not staying, but I will leave the bracket there. Could the buyer agree to that? Yes. The buyer and seller can agree to anything as long as it's legal, right? But I'm telling you, these are things, if you don't address it in the contract, you're going to have problems when you're getting close to closing. I promise you're going to have problems. So make sure you understand what the fixtures are. Okay. There are 4 tests of a fixture. Good idea to know what the 4 tests of a fixture are. If you're trying to figure out, is that a fixture or not? Well, hopefully one of these 4 tests will help you answer that question. Well, first of all, what does the contract say? What does the agreement say? And I will tell you, in pretty much all the contracts of sale I've ever seen, it's already pre-printed in the contract, where it specifically states, this sale includes all fixtures, currently attached to or planted on the premises. Y'all, that's pretty clear. It says right there, this sale includes fixtures. What was the fixture? Anything that's attached to the property is considered, or attached to the house even. Y'all, that's considered a fixture. All right. Another test is annexation. Y'all, annexation is dealing with the method of attachment. Y'all, they could ask you that. What is annexation? Y'all, that's the method in which something is attached. Y'all, for example, y'all say I want to put a privacy fence around my backyard. I go to Lowe's, I buy all the material for the fence. Right now, it's just sitting on the back of my truck. But what kind of property is that fence at this moment? Y'all, it's just personal property. Y'all, it's just sitting on the back of my truck right now, right? But once I start planting it in the ground, y'all, the posts will go in the ground, and y'all, anyway. So once I get the fence up and erected, y'all, now that fence is considered annexed in. Y'all, that becomes a fixture. Y'all, because you planted those posts in the ground, you've attached it to the land. Y'all, that's why as a buyer, you have every right to believe if there's a fence around the backyard, when you make that offer, that there will be a fence when you move in, right? Because y'all, it's been annexed, y'all, it's been attached. And then adaptation, y'all, sometimes, y'all, this one all by itself could be kind of difficult to use, but what they're basically saying here, y'all, for example, y'all, let's say I've got a garage door with a remote garage door. Y'all, a lot of people have these where they'll have like the remote on the visor of their car. And as they're pulling in the driveway, they can reach up, hit the button, and the garage door opens up so they can pull on in. Well, obviously, the remote control, is that real property or personal property? Y'all, obviously, it's personal property. But because of the use of it, y'all, this is where adaptation comes in. Seller, you would be expected to leave that remote control because that will open and shut the garage door. If I'm the buyer, right, I want the remote control because that's the only way I can be able to get in and out of the garage. And so I want to be able to get in and out of it. And quite frankly, seller, I don't want you to have access to it after I buy the property. So, y'all, due to adaptation, y'all, the seller would be expected to leave the remote control. And then the last test is intent. And I will tell you, y'all, hopefully you won't have to use this one, but y'all, if it comes down to it and buyer and seller are arguing or really putting up a fight over whether something's going to go or stay, we have to go to court. Y'all get the judge to rule on who's going to get whatever that property is. Y'all, well, then the courts are going to have to determine, well, what was the intent between the parties? Was it their intent for it to stay or was it for it to go? And how is the courts going to determine the intent? Y'all, they're going to go back up to number one there and look at the contract. What did the agreement say? What does the agreement say is staying or going? So that's how we're going to determine that. So y'all, those are the 4 tests of a fixture. Again, good idea to know what those are. But now we look at something called a trade fixture. Now y'all, this is different than just a fixture. Do not get this confused. Your trade fixture is not the same as a fixture. In fact, it says right here, your trade fixture is what kind of property? It's personal property. Your fixture is real property. But a trade fixture is personal property that's been attached to real property by a tenant leasing commercial space for their business or trade. All right, so now that's the definition. Now what I want to make sure you get from that definition, what kind of property are we dealing with? Commercial. Y'all, we're not talking about residential rental properties. We're talking about commercial properties that's been rented to a tenant for their business or trade. Y'all, this got nothing to do with residential rentals. Y'all, we're not even going there. There could be a million examples of that. But y'all, if you're renting a commercial building for your business and you have to attach things to the building, let's say, because it's needed for your whatever business you're in, y'all, that's considered a trade fixture. Well, the question is, y'all, say the lease is expiring, you're not going to renew it, you're moving or whatever. Well, can you take that trade fixture, something you've already attached to the building, can you take that with you when you go? And the answer is you can, but there are some conditions here. And I remember these conditions. Y'all, that trade fixture, whatever it is you attach, y'all, you would have to unattach it and repair any damage you caused by attaching it. You got to repair all that. But you got to do all that prior to the lease expiring. Y'all, that's important. Y'all, if that lease expires and you still have not unattached the trade fixture, y'all, then it becomes a fixture and belongs to the property owner. Now you cannot remove it. But as long as you remove it, unattach it before the lease expires, repair any damage that was caused, you can take it with you. So, y'all, that's a trade fixture. Y'all, and again, I beg you, y'all, what kind of property is a trade fixture? Y'all, that's considered personal property. You got to remember that. If it's just a fixture, that's real property. But a trade fixture is personal property. Okay. Y'all, and then the last definition that we're going to hit on here is something called factory-built housing. Y'all, that should be pretty self-explanatory. Y'all, this is housing that is built off-site, y'all, in a factory, in a building. Y'all sometimes hear it called manufactured homes, y'all, things of that nature. Y'all, so what is factory-built housing? Y'all, just housing that's built off-site. Sometimes y'all, they call it manufactured housing. Y'all, probably one of the more common names you see a lot is mobile homes, trailers. Y'all, which is not the terminology apparently that we're supposed to use anymore. But most people understand what a mobile home is. Y'all, it's manufactured housing, factory-built housing. Y'all, that's what they're talking about there. Now, it does say here, y'all, depending on the state you live in, y'all, again, based on your laws, y'all, factory-built housing could be considered personal property or real property. There are a lot of variables that go into determining whether it's going to be real or personal, but some of those variables might be, y'all, is it attached to the land? Because obviously it's personal property when it's built. Y'all, it's on wheels, got axles, tires. Y'all, you can actually roll it, pull it to wherever you want to set it up to live in. But once you get it to where you're going to live, y'all usually put it on some kind of foundation, right? Cinder blocks or something. Strap it down. But for it to be, now again, this is where it depends on the state you live in. But I think most states probably would require you, if you want it to be considered real property. And the reason that matters is for taxes. Y'all, is it going to be taxed as personal property or real property? That matters. Y'all, real property, a lot of times the taxes is tax deductible. Right? So people, if I got to pay taxes on it, I at least like to get the tax deduction. Personal property, that's not typically a tax deduction. Okay? But anyway, so how can I make it, or how do I make it legally considered real property? You again attach it to the land, put it on the foundation. But then a lot of times you have to actually remove the axles and the tires. Y'all can't be there. And you have to remove or cut off the tongue. So it cannot be moved again. Well, it can be, but not without a lot of effort. But once you cut the tongue off of, y'all, the tongue is the part you hook up to the truck, right? They haul it down. Cut that off. Remove the tires and axles. Strap it to the land. And now it's considered real property. Okay. All right. So, y'all, those are some of the terms or definitions we need to know going into this chapter. But next, we're going to get into some of the property rights you have by owning land.